Tech Sideline is presented by First Bank and Trust Company. They offer free checking with industry-leading mobile banking. Who you choose to bank with can make all the difference. Visit firstbank.com to learn more. How about them Hokies? Virginia Tech rocked Pitt in front of a sold-out crowd on Saturday night, scoring their highest point total under Brent Pry in a 38-21 win. Are the Hokies back on track? Does this win show signs that the season can be turned around? What changed within the offense to be so darn effective? We'll discuss all that and more on a beautiful Monday morning in Blacksburg. It's episode 316 of the Tech Sideline Podcast, and it starts right now. Welcome in once again, Hokie Nation. We record on Monday, October 2nd, 2023, from our Tech Sideline studio in the Virginia Tech Corporate Research Center. If you're watching on YouTube, make sure to like and subscribe. Go ahead and refer a friend to the show as well. Let's go ahead and introduce our football crew as always. To my right, lead analyst and columnist Chris Coleman. Across the way, senior staff writer Andy Bitter. In the fourth chair, managing editor David Cunningham. Producing behind the scenes, it's the mustached man, Mr. Nick Brown. And of course, I'm your host, Giovanni Heater. As always, Tech Sideline is presented by First Bank and Trust Company. Check out their new Checking with Perks account that comes with cell phone protection, roadside assistance, fuel savings, deals and discounts, and so much more. Visit firstbank.com to learn more about this great new account for students. All right, gentlemen, I'll start with one question here. Very, very simple. Here we go. How about them Hokies on Saturday, huh?
I think that was a much-needed shot in the arm for everybody, for the fan base, for the players, for the coaches, everything. You don't want to be 1-4 going into Florida State, obviously, but I think the main thing is like the fans needed a confidence boost in the football team and in the coaches, and especially at home like that, playing in such a great atmosphere. It would have been just another kick to the teeth, so to speak, if you'd lost that game. So yeah, I mean, I think everybody woke up on Sunday feeling a lot better about the situation. Hopefully it's something that is sustainable. I think if they continue to run that offensive system, it is sustainable. They can't revert to what they were doing before, but the main thing is, like, just from a morale perspective, I thought it was very big to get that win.
Yeah, you could sort of feel the season slipping away if they couldn't get a win in that one, especially knowing what's coming up next week and perhaps a likely result going down to Tallahassee. But you look at the previous three games, they were in that Purdue game, had a chance to win it, probably could have, did not win that one. Went up to Rutgers, less of a chance to win that one. It did get close there for a while. They had that 2-point conversion to get within, I think, 3 or something. I forget exactly what the score was. They were within a score there, got away from them in the fourth quarter. Marshall played really well, running the ball, got behind, had a chance there at the end to tie it up. So they had some performances that maybe weren't indicative of what their record was. So to get a win like this and sort of get the reward for the work that they're putting in, I think that's a real boost for a team that, you put the work in all week, you don't get the results, it can be very demoralizing. To get a result like that, I think it reinforces what the coaching staff is telling this team.
Let's start with talking about this quarterback. Kyron Drones went 12-19 for 228 yards and 3 touchdowns through the air, while amassing 41 yards on 21 carries for 2 scores on the ground as well. On Saturday night, he became the first and only quarterback in the ACC to account for 5 total touchdowns in a game this season. How about KD1 on Saturday?
I think it's like Andy said last week when people asked, what's the ideal offense to run with Kyron Drones? And Andy said something similar to the 2019 Hendon Hooker offense. And that's exactly what we got. I think they put him in the right position to succeed. I mean, going out there and dropping him back in the pocket and throwing it 35 times against Marshall, that's not going to work. That's not who he is as a quarterback. In 2019, in Hooker's first start, it was a run-heavy game plan, lots of moving parts. They only asked him to throw it 20 times. This game, run-heavy offense, lots of moving parts. They only asked Drones to throw it 19 times. It's like they finally figured out his strengths and weaknesses, and they built the offense around it. And I think it's amazing how much better players can look when the coaches put them in a position to succeed. I'll always draw on the Maurice DeShazo. I know some people watching this aren't old enough to know who Maurice DeShazo is, yourself included, Gio. He was Virginia Tech's starting quarterback in 1993 and 1994. As a junior in 93, in a run-and-shoot style offense with lots of motions, rollouts, heavy run game, things like that, 22 touchdowns, 7 interceptions, 9 yards per attempt, the third best quarterback rating in the country. Then as a senior, Tech changes offensive coordinators. They go to a pro-style offense. He drops to 7.2 yards per attempt, 13 touchdowns, 13 interceptions. Quarterback rating dropped by over 30 points as a senior. Different system, right? They were asking Kyron Drones to do Maurice DeShazo stuff like 1994 in previous weeks, and he didn't play very well, as you would expect. Saturday, they asked him to do Maurice DeShazo stuff from 1993, and it worked better. I mean, you have to design an offense that fits your quarterback's strengths and weaknesses. They finally did it, and everybody been saying, oh, Tech doesn't have any talent, blah, blah, blah. Well, it's amazing how much more talented the players look when they're put in a position to succeed. And I think they ran the ideal offense for Virginia Tech football the other night, and bam, they got a result.
Yeah, Drones, very impressive. 5 touchdowns accounted for. We went back during the game looking for previous quarterbacks who had done that. Josh Jackson was the last quarterback to do it against ECU, just dreadful ECU team in 2017. I mean, that was Chris could have thrown for 5 touchdowns against that team, I think. Before that, Gerard Evans did it once. Logan Thomas did it. Brian Randall did it. Michael Vick.
Wow.
Those are some names now. Those are not nobodies.
Don't forget Lee Suggs.
Lee Suggs. I mean, I was just talking about quarterbacks. Lee Suggs, touchdown machine, obviously. He had a huge game like that. Amazingly, Tyrod never did it in his time.
That is kind of hard to believe.
5 touchdowns, but the great career that he had. But you look back, and those are some impressive names on that list. So it's not just nobodies that do that. Very rarely flash in the pan. Josh Jackson didn't have the career that panned out the way it here with the injury and then transferring. And again, that ECU team was so bad on defense. But to go out there and do that, I thought it was pretty impressive. And I feel like. And I go back, I wrote that feature story on him, and I talked to his dad. He said, he needed to get reps, like game reps. There's only so much more he could improve by watching. Or by, I think when I interviewed Kyron when he transferred here, he said, there's only so much I can learn by watching other people's mistakes. I need to be out there making my own mistakes and learning how to play. And you're seeing that now. He seems to be getting better with every single rep and the comfort that he gains in the offense. So to go out there and have that performance, I thought it was very impressive, and I think it's just been this steady progression that he's had the last couple of weeks.
And I think it's the fact that it came against Pitt is another one. Like, Pitt is a historically good defensive program under Pat Narduzzi. I wouldn't say that this is one of his most talented defensive teams, but they've still been pretty good defensively this year. So I think that's a good sign. I also find it kind of weird that if you had told me that Tyler Bowen's best 2 games as Virginia Tech's offensive coordinator would be against Pitt.
Both times, yeah.
Yeah.
2 of the 3 times they've gotten 400 yards been against Pitt. The other was against Wofford.
Right. Never would have guessed that.
Kyron Drones talked a lot about his confidence after the game when they had him on the ACC Network set, which was really cool, by the way. They had Coach Pry on there for about a 10-minute segment after the game as well, and there was just a lot of good stuff, a lot of funny moments as well. So if you get a chance, be sure to go and check that out. It's all on the Hokies Sports YouTube. But how big can a game like that be for the trajectory of a young quarterback? We're looking at a guy that, in all likelihood, is Virginia Tech's quarterback of the future.
It's confidence. It has to be confidence because if you don't make that switch, and he's getting better himself too. I think his decision making was better, but I think it helps when you he's not an experienced passer, right? So you're going to make more mistakes the more you're asked to throw the football, and you get a strong running game, and then he only throws it 19 times. I mean, that I think that maximizes your chance of success. I thought it was a great game plan, and that's the right game plan you build around him. And I thought that was one of the most physically toughest performance you've seen from a Tech quarterback. I mean, you get to that end of the game, and the Pitt defenders didn't look like they were too interested in tackling him, or Tootin for that matter.
No, and Drones is a big guy. He's a tough guy to bring down. With his throwing, I just thought he looked very comfortable and confident out there. They started off with that deep ball to Daquan Felton. It almost was exactly like the Rutgers game on the other sideline, except Felton reeled it in this time. But I mean, he dropped that in there perfectly on the run. You could not throw that ball better. That touchdown he had to Jalen Lane. Pitt brings 2 blitzers out the corner. So he's standing in there. He knows those guys are coming. He's probably going to get hit at the end of that. He delivers a perfect pass to Lane, and then I don't know what was going on with the coverage, but Lane turned around and there's 50 yards of open field in front of him. I think even Jalen was kind of surprised it was that open. So I just, I thought, Drones made some throws in that game that were very impressive, stood in the pocket. That's a fearsome pass rush. Pitt still got after the quarterback in that game. They still played in the backfield a lot on a lot of runs. 12 tackles for loss in that game. So that was an aggressive defensive line. It's not like he sat back there and just had this clean pocket the entire game. So to have the passing stats that he had, I think it was 12 yards per attempt. Last time Virginia Tech had a passing performance like that was in that Duke game, the last one that Fuente coached, where they rolled all over Duke, and everything they were doing offensively was working because Duke was just so bad defensively in that game. So it's been a while since they've had a game like that. I think the time before that, it was Hendon Hooker against Louisville in the COVID year, where he was like 10 for 10 passing or something like that in that game. So it doesn't happen often. You get yards per attempt like that, and just very impressive showing all around. I mean, he's the quarterback now. You can dispense with this 2 quarterback nonsense.
You can't go away from this system. No way.
You can't. And I mean, even when Grant Wells is healthy, I don't think he's completely healthy yet. I think you just have to. I mean, he's a team captain. He's a guy who's been the quarterback. He lost his job because he got injured. But I think that's one of those hard conversations you have to have as a coach. It's like, this is the offense we're running now. This is the direction we're going. This is the quarterback, Drones. There's the future of this program. And currently he's playing great in the present. So you got to roll with that hot hand and keep going with it.
My favorite play of the game, and you mentioned it, was the pass play to Lane. And this wasn't obvious, like watching the game when it happened, but when I watched the condensed version yesterday, I watching it in real time, I thought it was just a slant pattern, and it wasn't. It was like a sit-down route. And Lane recognized that the linebackers were about to over-pursue to that side of the field, so he just drifted to the inside, found the open spot in the zone, and Drones did a really good job of anticipating him being there. It's like those 2 guys were right on the same page. So that was probably my favorite play of the game. Now, there were a lot of candidates there, obviously, a lot more than usual, but that one was probably
a lot of highlights to choose from this time.
I liked the flea flicker that almost connected. I think Drones just overthrew him a little bit, but Quan almost had another 40-plus yard.
I forgot to mention that one in my article yesterday. I went over yesterday the types of plays that Virginia Tech ran that they had not run this year. So you had the quick toss sweep. Then you had the fake quick toss sweep with Drones running it in the opposite direction. You had triple option. You had the smoke and mirrors passing play to Daquan Wright, which was very reminiscent of the Dalton Keene, James Mitchell catches in the old Hendon Hooker offense.
That always worked, by the way.
Right.
It always worked. It was always open. It was
incredible.
The Turner Bradshaw reverse.
Yeah, I loved that.
It was David Wilson-esque, where it's like, this is going to lose 20. This is going for a touchdown. And then it finishes with like 3 yards. It's like, okay, nice game.
Exactly. So like 3 carries by the wide receivers. Flea flicker. Trying to think if there's anything else, but you get my point. There was just more of a variety of stuff that Pitt had to defend. So all you have to do is like slow down the defense's reads for just a split second, and it gives your offensive players a better chance to succeed. And I felt like that was the first time in the last 2 seasons that I felt like Virginia Tech went out there offensively and outcoached the opposition. I think they flat out outcoached Pitt the other night. And I don't think they did that in any of the previous 15 games. So definitely a step in the right direction. Now let's keep running that offense, and let's not revert back to the Marshall offense where you ask the quarterback to throw it that many times. That's not the right offense for Virginia Tech.
Chris, go ahead, Andy.
Yeah, credit to, I mean, we rag on him a lot, Tyler Bowen, the play calling, but I thought that was his best game since he's been here in terms of the game plan. And like, he's still not working with a ready-made offensive line. So they're still moving the pocket. They're still doing misdirection and screens going this way and that way. And they got a little bit more outside runs. And Pry said it afterwards. He's like, we're not a team that can just line up and go inside zone. Just like, that's how we beat you. That's not going to be it. So you have to game plan around that. Like I said, Pitt still got a lot of tackles for loss, still got in the backfield quite a bit, but that's the offensive line you're working with. You can't call plays with the offensive line you hope you have one day. You have to deal with the one that you have. And he did a good job with that. And moving drones around, getting them out of the pocket, and different kind of runs and eye candy and stuff that they have to be aware of. I think it really worked very well in this game.
He had so many similar comments last year, Pry did, when he talked about the offense being too easy to draw a beat on, and they can't just line up and do whatever they want and run play action and things like that. So he keeps saying all this stuff, but then nothing ever changes. And then it finally changed. So I'm really curious to know what finally flipped the script this week, so to speak. Like, why did they finally realize? Why was it? What was so specific about this week when they said, we should probably do this with the offense? And the only time we saw heavy doses of misdirection in the offense in the past was NC State last year in that third quarter when they scored 21 points and had 200 yards of offense, and then it just stopped.
Clearly, they were saving this all for conference play.
Yes.
They didn't want to give any of it away in the non-conference
Tied
schedule.
for first place in the ACC.
I saw somebody put that on the boards, tongue-in-cheek, I would suspect the whole thing. But no, I don't think they saved this for conference play.
Well, I know Andy's newer to the show. Chris, it's almost as if you've done 316 of these things, because I had literally mapped out in questions. Was going to ask about the pre-snap eye candy. You guys already hit on that. Was going to mention the fact that Brent Pry said that he thought Tyler Bowen called a great game offensively. Was going to ask you guys about that, and you nailed that.
So he said it a couple times.
Yeah,
he wanted to get that point across in the post game.
And as he should, right?
Sure.
Right?
I mean, listen.
Those are the guys getting ragged on, right?
Right. Well, Pry has been... He never mentions Bowen by name unless he's complimenting him, of course. But he's been very critical very pointed with a lot of his comments about the offense dating back to the middle of last season, saying they're too easy to draw a beat on. Vanilla. You've never called a head coach... I've never heard a head coach call his offensive coordinator's offense vanilla before.
Unless it was a spring game.
Something exactly. Unless he's still saying, yeah, that was the plan, right? So yeah, I mean, I think Pry's kind of handled the situation similarly. Like, you criticize when you feel like it's warranted, not as heavy-handed, so to speak, as we do, because that's his offensive coordinator. But then when he felt like there was heavy praise, he praised him heavily, as he should, because I thought it was a great plan. It's not one thing I would change about that game.
I don't think Pry's oblivious that Bowen was feeling some heat.
Yeah.
I mean, this last podcast, not that I'm saying they're listening to our podcast, but this last podcast we talked about like the whole time. Like, do they need to make a change at the end of the season? Like, I tweet stuff, and then people will like tag Coach Pry. It'd be like the game time for next week, and they'll be like, at Coach Pry, why haven't you fired Tyler Bowen yet? I'm like, okay, they see some of this stuff. This leaks into their consciousness over time. So I mean, he's aware of this, and I think when a coach does well, you give him a pick-me-up like that. You give him the dap that he needs after the game.
Absolutely. And if Pry was feeling it from like higher circles than just social media too. I heard that last week post-Marshall was not a good week for the Hokie Club as far as donors calling in and saying,
oh, I'm sure.
Shocking.
As far as like, that meeting we were going to have this week, not going. Need to see some results before we have that conversation. And so, yeah, I mean, there was pressure from there. I mean, I think the first thing people look at is social media, but most people who tweet don't donate. I mean, seriously. But if
you were a wit and said that, people would be going nuts about that.
Absolutely right. I mean, obviously there's exceptions, but I think for the vast majority, it's true. And it's certainly not in the vast amount of money that the people who are calling the Hokie Club, they're going to be listened to as opposed to the people on social media. But those people were not happy either. And I don't know. I did feel like there was a greater sense of desperation this week, both from the players and the coaches. I thought the players had an extra – thought they were just less passive, more aggressive, more physical. You always look more physical as a football player when you know what to do and you're playing with confidence. So I'd be interested to know if they did anything differently this week in practice, like besides the scheme, because there did seem to be a different mentality out there.
We're going to head to David in the fourth chair in just a sec. You guys seen that Kevin James meme out there?
How could you miss it?
How could you miss it? That was totally Tyler Bowen. Like, who said I'm on the hot seat?
Somebody... it was, I forget which game it was. Somebody's doing a field goal attempt and they like put that on the scoreboard behind it. Was it Maryland who did that? I don't know if they missed the field goal, but it was pretty good.
Nick said they did.
Nick says they missed the field goal. Well, the backup, just to defend with some evidence, our stance on Tyler Bowen calling a great game, it's hard to deny it. 427 yards of total offense, 38 points scored, all of which were offensive, 25 first down to Pitt's 9 first downs, nearly 38 minutes in time of possession. David, you got something for us in the fourth chair?
Yeah, I think my biggest takeaway from this game from Tyler Bowen was how he stuck with the stuff that worked. Virginia Tech ran the ball 30 times in the first half. Tech ran it 30 times against Marshall in the entire game. And it wasn't like Tech averaged a lot. Tech averaged 3.4 yards per carry, but Tyler Bowen ran the ball, got them to run the ball 59 times. Sure, sacks are included in there, obviously. But Bashal Tutin had over 100 yards. Kyron Drones moved the ball. And I think when you complement that with the passing game, I was just looking, Kyron Drones had 12 completions. 8 of them were for more than 10 yards. But the other 4 were for 6 yards, 7 yards, 7 yards, and 8 yards. I thought Bowen, like you said, Chris, when you have to create an offense that fits your quarterback. And this was the first time, I think, in Tyler Bowen's tenure, we saw an offense that fit the quarterback that was back there. I think at some times in the past, like last year with Grant Wells, like we saw that NC State game, stuff worked well. But I think some concepts just weren't necessarily tailored to Grant Wells' strengths. And a little bit square peg, round hole kind of thing. And I thought this game, everything kind of came together. I have the same question as you. Why?
Yeah.
But maybe it's something about Pitt. Just the way Pitt lines up and plays defense that allowed for that. But my biggest takeaway was that Tech stuck with the stuff that worked. And it wasn't one of those games where, like I think you go back to the Marshall game, Price said the message at halftime in the locker room was we have to run the ball more. And then Tech came out, tried to run it, didn't work, so they went away from it. And this was like, it didn't matter. It felt like it didn't matter. They were going to stick with the game plan.
Yeah. I think, you mentioned how many times they carried the ball. They gave it to Tutin a lot. That was, he had
25?
He had 24 carries for 109 yards.
And I think
he
Marshall
also caught 4 passes for 37 yards and a touchdown.
In Marshall, he had 9 carries, and he was averaging 8.8 yards per carry. So they went to him a lot more. And they, like David said, they stuck with it on the ground. It wasn't always just, wide open lanes, but then you look at, what that does. Time of possession, nearly 38 minutes they had the ball. You get to the fourth quarter, I think they had 82 rushing yards in the fourth quarter, something like that.
They had that 8-minute, 54-second drive.
They really just started wearing them down. And, that's what happens when you run the ball that much and you pick your spots in the passing game. I think that's what they want this offense to be. That's Brent Pry. We've asked him a lot over the 2 years, and this was the lead of my story on Saturday. It's like, what do you want this offense to be? And he always explained it. It was kind of this circular way of describing it. From now on, he gets to be like the Pitt game. That's what I want it to be like, is in the Pitt game. I want us to run the ball. I want us to be committed to running the ball. I want us to be explosive in the air, dual threat quarterback. I think Tyler Bowen calls a better game for a dual threat quarterback. I just think, if that's the archetype of the offense, that's it. The Pitt game. Just point to it. Hold up a picture that has the Pitt score on it every time we ask that question in the future.
Tutin had forced 10 missed tackles against Pitt. So he forced more missed tackles against Pitt than he had carries against Marshall.
Wow.
Yeah. It's like, it'd be like a basketball coach at the end of the game and your leading scorer only had 5 field goal attempts. That's the number one question you ask.
He was 4 for 4 on 3-pointers. It's like, well, why didn't he take 23 pointers if that was the case?
Yeah.
Well, 59 rushing attempts, like David had mentioned on Saturday. That was the most in regulation since the Hokies played ECU back in 2017. 199 yards on the ground as a team. So my question to you guys, and maybe you don't necessarily have an answer. Okay, what changed? Because this is a team that ran the ball for 11 yards against Purdue?
There's just a wider variety of play calls. Everything was so targeted before. And that's what Brent Pry meant last year when he said we're easy to draw a beat on. Tech wasn't doing anything or they weren't doing very much to break up linebackers and safeties and ends key reads. You know, when you know the ball's not going outside the tackle box very often, you know, you can cheat. But now, you know, there was more men in motion, more pulling, just things that could slow down the linebackers' reads just a little bit. And sometimes that's all you need. I mean, this is a game of margins generally, not just over the course of like the whole box score when you can search for hidden yards, but on any individual play, just that little split second, that timing can be critical between success and defeat. And so I just think that it's a tougher offense to defend now when you've got that much motion and that many moving parts, and there's a greater variety of things that the offense is doing in the running game.
And well, let's not forget drones in this
That
whole
helps,
equation.
yes.
You know, drones did not play till the very end of that Purdue game. I mean, they had a quarterback playing on one leg in the second half. I think you don't have to respect the quarterback run, and Purdue certainly didn't in that game. There's some option plays where they're like, no, you keep it. That's fine. You keep it on this one. So I think you look at the yards per game rushing since Drones was inserted in the lineup, and I forget what it is, but it's drastically different. It was like 60 before him and 100 and something now. So you have that extra guy to account for who has that ability. I think it allows you to do a lot of other stuff in the offense that defenses have to worry about. Just a completely different offense and outlook with him in the game.
It's interesting to me, like, seeing what the offense looks like now against Pitt. Drones was obviously Bowen's number one target in the transfer portal. Like, the season ended, and he immediately flew to Texas to recruit Drones.
Yeah, he was there the first day.
Yeah.
When he was like camping out of his house to get in there right away.
Exactly. But then he gets here, and they basically continued to run the same offense as they ran last year. So, like, when I saw Kyron Drones in practice between every open media session plus the spring game, I counted his touchdowns and interceptions while I was there physically to see it. And it was 1 touchdown and 4 interceptions. And the 1 touchdown was the one in practice this August that Canteen dropped and then got caught by James.
I remember that one. Yeah.
It should have been 0 touchdowns and 5 interceptions. So this was a guy who was clearly struggling in the Virginia Tech offense that was being run earlier. You've got 2 different quarterbacks, each with their own strengths and weaknesses. You want to try to make it an equal competition, but if you run one offense, it greatly favors one guy. If you run a different offense, it greatly favors the other guy. So they were running an offense that did not favor Drones, of course. I think some of the stuff they're doing now they could have been doing anyway, though obviously not all of it. I just wish you could go back in time and you run this offense since the very beginning of spring. If you do that, I mean, you could possibly have 1 or 2 more wins now, you think? Purdue, Marshall?
They're both there for the taking.
Sure. Yeah.
No doubt. Well, 2 takeaways I had from a personnel standpoint coming out of Saturday, looking at some of the condensed game and thinking about it a little bit more. I think Bayshul might be the biggest weapon on the offense, his ability to make guys miss, his explosive running, an incredibly physical runner. And then I think Quan Felton has emerged as, wide receiver 1 for Drones. He seems to be his biggest target. For whatever reason, he seems to go to him more than Jalen Lane. Now, Lane, it was kind of banged up and now has re-entered himself back into the offense, but just wanted to get your thoughts on those 2 kind of claims a little bit.
I think Felton, it took him a little while maybe to adjust to this level because the first 2 games he caught 1 pass and had 2 drops, I think. Had the drop that got intercepted against Purdue. But ever since then, things have been better. I think he's reestablished himself. He did have the 1 drop against Rutgers, but other than that, I think he's gotten better progressively each game as he's adjusted to playing football at this level. It is a jump going from Norfolk State to playing FBS competition, and it's an adjustment actually having quarterbacks that can. I mean, if you go back and watch his like film at like Norfolk State, like their quarterback was so bad that he was having to like contort his body in all these weird ways to have a chance to make the catch. So sometimes you're not even used to having the ball thrown at you in just a regular style, yeah. So there's been an adjustment period, but yeah, he looks like he's certainly an ACC caliber player. I thought he was, but you never really know until they get here and start showing it. But yeah, that was a good evaluation by Virginia Tech. So there's talent down there at those lower levels. I mean, Tootin was an FCS running back, and now quite clearly he's an ACC caliber player, and same thing for Felton. And I do think that one class, and Stu Holt talked about this in the spring. He's like, Tootin slipped through the cracks because that was the COVID year, was his recruiting year, and they played a limited schedule in New Jersey that year, and you couldn't get out and scout anyway, and you can't even really accurately judge the film because to a certain extent, because you might be missing half the defense because of COVID and things like that. So I think a lot of people slipped through the cracks in that class.
There's some odd fits too. I mean, Drones was in that recruiting class. He couldn't take an official visit. Mm-hmm. First official visit he took was as a transfer coming to Virginia Tech. Right. That was the only one because he shut it down right after that. So I think there were some just very odd fits with people like, well, this is the best place because I talked to a guy. Like the first time he met Dave Aranda was when he enrolled in school and showed up at Baylor. It's like, okay, that's not how this is supposed to work. As far as your two thoughts, yeah, Tootin is fantastic. I think he's their best running back since Khalil Herbert.
No question.
Here, doing things like that. Raheem Blackshear did that a little bit. They didn't give him the opportunities to do it as much as they probably should have. He's sticking in the NFL, but Herbert, it reminds me a lot of Herbert, just the way he runs, and he's a good blend of speed and power and balance in that sense. In terms of receivers, I still think Lane might have a higher ceiling there, maybe be able to do a little bit more at receiver. He's been banged up for two of the starts that Drones has had so far. I think the more you get into the season, the more well-rounded his game is, and you'll continue to see him perform out there.
Yeah, it's interesting with the wide receivers. Now, one thing you have to look back at the Hendon Hooker era when they switched from the Ryan Willis offense to the Hendon Hooker offense, and all of a sudden, the wide receivers didn't catch as many passes. So like Hazelton goes from being a 55 catch guy to like a 30 catch guy. So when that happened, Hazelton's like, I'm out, right?
He did that a couple times in his career.
Yeah, did that a couple times. Right. But at any rate, like the production of the wide receivers dropped off as the offense changed. So you're not going to see, I don't think, like a slot receiver go out there and have like a 7-catch, 120-yard gain or something like that in this current offense, especially when you're only throwing it you only threw it 19 times this past week, right? So there's going to be limited receptions, relatively speaking, for those guys. So production becomes more important, in the running game now, but it is going to affect the numbers of these wide receivers, and it's going to seem like that they're not getting much wide receiver production, but in reality is when you only throw it 19 times and 5 of those times are to tight ends and running backs, and then you're not going to get like a ton of production from the wideouts.
I have a trivia question for you guys. Bayshall Tootin had 24 rushes and 4 receptions. There's been one other player since 1987 to do that. David Wilson was close. He had a game with 23 rushes and 4 receptions. Who was the other running back? Hint, this was before 2000.
Before 2000.
Wow.
I'm going to go. Can I get a guess?
Sure.
Lee Suggs. Or was he not before 2000?
Oh, he didn't start until 2001, Gio. Or
nice.
Sorry, 2000. He was 2000.
We'll fix that in post. That won't be in there.
If you can't tell, I was not here.
Okay. My guess, is it Beamer Bowl era or before?
Pre-2000.
Pre-2000.
Yeah, it was.
So between 93 and 99, basically.
Yeah.
Okay. Marcus Parker.
No.
Oh, man.
1993.
Dwayne Thomas?
Yeah.
No kidding.
He did it twice.
Really?
So that's 3 instances. Bayshall Tootin on Saturday, and then Dwayne Thomas did it twice. He had one 25 rush attempt game with 4 receptions against UVA, and then he did it against Indiana in the Independence Bowl.
Okay.
That was sort of that Billy Height philosophy of you're going to split up carries. Even if you have a great back, you can't run him into the ground. Cyrus Lawrence, they kind of ran him into the ground here. I think Height always kind of felt guilty about the fact that he never had a professional career because he had so many carries here, and then he gets his knee injured at the end of his career. That was his philosophy moving forward, was split up the carries, get the workload spread around a little bit.
And generally speaking, with Height, it was 2 carries or 2 series for the starter, 1 series for the backup. 2 series for the starter, 1 series for the backup. That's the same rotation Tech is doing this year. It's 2 series for Tootin, then 1 for Thomas, then 2 for Tootin, 1 for Thomas. And I think that's the proper way to handle it. I mean, everybody says, well, you're not gonna be able to keep as many running backs on your roster. Well, the ideal situation is to have a 2 running back system. I mean, there's only so many plays in a football game, and I think a running back's one of those positions where you kind of got to get lathered up and get into the rhythm of things to be most effective. Kind of same thing as linebacker on defense. And we're going to talk about defense.
Oh yeah, that's next after the ad read. Don't worry. Don't worry.
But yeah, I really think they're doing a good job of handling the running back rotation this year.
While we're still on the offense, Andy, the only other, you mentioned the stat with Logan Thomas and all those quarterbacks earlier. The only quarterback besides Kyron Drones at Virginia Tech since '87 to have 3 passing touchdowns and 2 rushing touchdowns in a game was Logan Thomas. He did it twice in 2011 against Miami and Georgia Tech. So all of those other guys who scored, they didn't throw for as many touchdowns,
right.
or they didn't have as like the combination that Kyron Drones did. So pretty interesting company.
And we should mention that Michael Vick did it in a half against Rutgers. He didn't play in the second half.
In 99.
Was that in Lane or Piscataway?
I think that was Piscataway.
I remember that was the day when, like, y'all don't even know what I'm talking about on this, but when not all games were on television. And if they were, it might not be available in your region. I want to say that Rutgers game, I maybe picked it up on Rabbit Ears on some random channel, and I watched it like with a lot of static and things like that. But I mostly listened to it on the radio. And that's, I know that's hard for some of y'all to probably believe these days, but that's the things we used to have to do.
So when you're complaining about having to tune into the CW or watching Spurtle ads on the ACC network, just remember there was a day where you couldn't even watch these things.
That's right.
Fair enough. Well, the Tech Sideline Podcast is also brought to you by Coldwell Banker Townside Realtors, trusted real estate services for the Roanoke and New River Valleys of Virginia. If you're in the market to purchase or sell a residential property, or if you're looking for land or investment property in Southwest Virginia, boy, do we have you covered. With 3 offices in the area, we serve Blacksburg, Christiansburg, Radford, Roanoke, Salem, Vinton, Smith Mountain Lake, and all of the surrounding areas. Visit cbtownside.com to learn more. All right, like I said, Chris has done 300 of these things, and he brings us right into our talk about the defense. So let's get into it. The Hokies allowed just 38 rushing yards on 1.6 yards per carry. Pitt averaged 229 yards versus Virginia Tech in the last 3 meetings, and that was not the case on Saturday. We knew the Hokies struggled mightily to stop the run. What changed on Saturday?
They were better, but how much better, I don't know. Pitt stinks.
Fair.
Like, their offense is awful. They have a lot of injuries on the offensive line. I don't think they have as much talent at wide receiver. They don't have anybody as big at running back as they had in the past. Schematically, quite frankly, they're like Virginia Tech before the Pitt game from a schematic standpoint. Just very, very... They're not going to fool you on defense. Like, they're not going to go out there and out scheme you. I mean, they're going to out physical you and out tough you, and they don't have the horses to do that this year. And I think when Narduzzi has had the horses, his offenses have been very effective. But I've never gotten the feeling that they've been a team that's tried to outthink defenses, and I think that he's a little bit antiquated from that respect.
Yeah, and I think a big thing was the defensive line really showed up.
They did. They were
in
much
this
better.
game.
Yep.
David got the detail from Mario Kendricks after the game that during the week, J.C. Price just wrote up on the board the rushing totals that Pitt has had the last 2 games. And Price said it afterwards, like, there's only so much your pride can take where people keep telling you how bad you've been that you show up. And I thought the defensive line played angry and aggressive in that game. I think looking at the initial PFF grades, the top 7 of the top 8 defensive grades went to defensive linemen.
I believe that.
In that game. Powell Ryland played great. Norrell Pollard played great. Mario Kendricks had that play where he got the swim move and was like 2 inches away from getting a sack under Kovic, and then Powell Ryland comes in and knocks it away. So Kendricks doesn't get any credit for that play.
A shame.
Any statistical credit, even though he made the play. And then Powell Ryland comes in. I guess that's payback for Powell Ryland not getting that sack on in the ODU game earlier this year when he knocked the ball loose. But they just played aggressive and angry up front, and they got after the quarterback. And Dracovic, it seems like he's gotten worse over his career. He's played in Lane Stadium 3 times. He's been sacked 10 times since he's played here.
I didn't even think about last year.
Last year they were all over him. He had no offensive line. This year, like, I don't know what he's done to tick off the offensive line guys, but he has not been blessed with some great offensive lines the last 2 years. But they got after him, and they were in that backfield. Almost every time he dropped back to pass, there was they had the big pass, 2 big pass plays, but other than that, he was just, I think there was a stat line, he was like 2 for 9 at one point for like 100 yards or something. Very bizarre stat line, but he just did not have a lot of time back there.
I want to say at one point he had completed 3 passes for like 200 or 4 passes for like 200 or something like that. It was
crazy
insane.
Stat line with those big plays, but most of the time they were on him, and he was not comfortable back
At
there.
halftime, he was 3 of 12 for 117 yards.
Okay.
And a touchdown.
Okay.
Wow, that's actually incredible.
And then he added the 61-yarder in the second half,
shortly,
right?
Yeah, it wasn't fairly. God, what was there?
It was
in the third quarter, right?
Yeah.
Early third quarter.
Yeah.
I would say.
And then they got the fumble on the next one to get within
exactly.
7.
Because every time Tech threatened that they were going to like blow the game out of the water, it seemed like something crazy would happen. I think that was Pitt's 5th different starting offensive line in as many games, I believe, something like that. If that happened to Virginia Tech, we would be sitting here saying, oh my gosh, there's no way you can get any cohesiveness with an offense when that happens. And that's true. That's been a big, big part of Pitt's problems. It's like you said, poor Dracovic, everywhere he goes, he just gets in a really bad offensive line situation. Now, from a Virginia Tech specific standpoint, like you said, I do think they were more aggressive up front, and they played pissed off, quite frankly, up front. And I also think they did some other things. They didn't rotate their linebackers this week. Alan Tisdale got all but 1 of the snaps at Mike. And at backer, Kelly Lawson got all but 4 of the snaps. And it's like I said earlier, it's like, I think linebackers are similar to running backs. They got to get lathered up and into the rhythm of the game and things like that. Like Bud Foster hardly ever rotated linebackers at Virginia Tech. And I just, unless you're playing one of those offenses that's going to have the ball for 85 plays or something like that, I don't think there's a big reason to rotate linebackers. So I think they handle that well. And then they finally moved Delane to safety. I don't know if they did that willingly or because...
No, that was a necessity.
Yeah.
I mean, Peoples Drast, he didn't play. Jalen Jones didn't even draft.
He was out. Game. Yeah, so I think what I'm really asking is, would they have done that anyway? Because I would have done that anyway, whether Jalen Jones was injured or not. I think we had seen enough to realize that Jalen Jones was probably not as good an option at Delane as safety, and then you have to try to figure out what it looks like with Canteen at corner and then Delane with safety. But I think that's a better option either way, whether there was injuries or not. And that's one I kind of wish they had gone to a week earlier, just like the offensive scheme. But that's okay. I mean, 7 games left. I think you figured out your best defensive rotation at this point, and you figured out what kind of offensive scheme that you should be running. Can't start the season over. When you say it's a fresh start, there's really not a fresh start in the middle of the season, because those games you already lost, they count, unfortunately. It's not a preseason. But I think if they continue to do those types of things, we can enjoy the rest of the season, without looking at the record, so to speak. Like Tech is 2-3. Let's assume they're 2-4 after this week. You wouldn't bet on them making a bowl game at this point, but if you just throw that part out of your mind and just focus on what happens from here on out, I think if they continue to do some of those things, then they got a chance to be a very competitive football team from here on out.
Yeah, and just a point on the run defense, I think Pitt's longest run was 12 yards. It was Dracovic leaked out, and he did a play fake, and Jade McDonald looked at him. He's like, "No, there's no way,
chance.
No way." Yes, and he went the other way, and Dracovic just kind of waltzed around the side. But 12 yards, one run that went over 10 yards. That's been the problem, and especially at second level. They didn't have as many opportunities because I think the front played so well in shutting those down, but it wasn't the 60-yard touchdown run. It wasn't the 56-yard touchdown run that you've seen the last couple of weeks in these games, and those add up. That's where that's where Tech's really been hurt with so many yards that they've given up on the ground. Those huge plays, they didn't allow any of those, and that was a major factor in this game.
No offense in the country can consistently go 6 yards a play, 13-yard drives the whole game. Like, if you remember back earlier in the season, Tech wasn't generating any big plays in the run game. You remember the Old Dominion game? Tech's 2 longest runs in that game were 10 yards and 9 yards, and they were both by Grant Wells. Like, that was how bad the running game was as far as generating big plays. You've got to get some 20-plus yard, runs out there and to get that yardage total up.
Well, Virginia Tech held Pitt to 2 of 10 on third down, 0 of 1 on fourth down. Seemed to always come up in the big moments. I also like that. Correct me if I'm wrong that this was new, but they were playing that Joker and the Thief a lot on third down and then again on the fourth down. And I don't know, it added a little something for me. I liked
didn't
it.
pay any attention. Let me say this. This was another point I wanted to make. Remember all those years where we always talked about the fan experience and everybody's complaining about they should do this, they should do that. Is anybody complaining about any of that? Isn't it so much better a fan experience when you score 38 points and play an entertaining brand of football?
Yeah, it was a fun game.
It was a great fan experience. And so somebody at Tech has told me this before. He said, whenever Tech loses, we get emails all over the place. You should be doing this. Your lines in the stadium stink. You don't have enough beer selection. Your music is too loud, blah, blah, blah. And he's like, whenever Tech wins, we never get any emails. Everybody's mad at everything when they lose, but suddenly they ignore all that stuff when you win. So it's like, I didn't really pay a lot of attention to the peripherals the other night. Quite frankly, just enjoyed the experience.
Fair. I always tend to pay attention to what do they do any stadium on third down, because like third down when the defense is out there, like everybody's kind of got their own thing, and Tech seemed to switch it up this week or this season at least. I don't remember it in the games prior, but I liked it.
I didn't even notice, honestly, when I was doing. What is the best third down thing that you've heard?
It used to be a turkey gobble.
Well, they still do the turkey gobble. But that's what they used to do at Tech. I feel like in my 2 years here so far, it was just the turkey gobble, and it was missing something like loud. And then like in a big moment, the last couple of years, they do like stand up and shout.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Well, when I was young, they would do the Imperial Death March a lot on third down.
That's pretty
Wisconsin
pretty
used
cool.
to do Crazy Train, the intro to Crazy Train. The best one that I've heard out there, I think, was East Carolina. Because Vince McMahon went there.
Yeah.
So they would do the Undertaker, like, gong.
Yeah,
the
nice.
intro
That's what
to
they do
it.
at the Dome.
It's just like, okay, this is really, because it kind of builds and the crowd gets into it. I thought that was always a nice touch.
On third,
that they had
on third
there.
down, they do that. They should have done Vince McMahon's own intro song on third down.
They
No
could have.
chance.
The Undertaker gong is better because it just like hits you out of nowhere and the whole stadium kind of gets into the whole thing.
Yeah, they do Hell's Bells by AC/DC, but it has the same gong
Right.
at the Dome, and is anyways, it was good. Do you guys know what Joker and the Thief is? You guys have no idea what I'm talking about?
This sounds like a young person's thing. I don't know. I've not.
I'll play it very briefly. It's worth. I'm curious to see in the comments people's thoughts. Copyright? Oh, never mind. I can't copyright. Nick Brown shut it down. Good call.
You
Will
can
Stewart would have been like,
you
we're
can
not.
sing it yourself like you did the stand up and shout.
Yeah, I think that's all right.
To be fair, I never heard of the Johnny Cash song that they play before Enter Sandman until they.
What?
It's a nice
I'd
touch.
never heard of it.
It's a nice touch.
Yeah.
It's a good like.
great
It's a good.
touch.
We're walking a long distance from the locker room. So
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
It's awesome. There, you got.
I think it adds a lot. I just never heard the song before they started doing it.
I like even before the Johnny Cash, they always play "The Outsiders" by Eric Church, and that is a part of the lead up as well. That one's not talked about enough. It's part of the. So you have your beverages come out with the Eric Church, then you have the appetizer is Johnny Cash, and it's the appetizer to the greatest entrance in college
we
football.
should have a
which
whole
is
separate
Sandman.
podcast one day to like top 10 songs you could play at a Virginia Tech football game besides Enter Sandman.
you saw some of the discourse last week. Where somebody always throws this out there when the team is struggling. It's like this team doesn't. They shouldn't play under Sandman
They don't
before a
deserve
game.
it.
They
They
don't
haven't earned
deserve it.
it.
It's like first of all,
Nobody would
like,
sit in the seats
Why?
if
Why would you punish the fans? Like it's not the
It's not
fans'
their
fault. They just want to go
Throw
to
the
that.
fans a bone.
Second of
man.
all, like what are you talking about? Don't like it's ridiculous. It comes up at least once a year when the team is struggling. It's like this team doesn't deserve Enter Sandman. Stop playing it. It's like all right, take a walk, settle down.
Yeah, it was when I was in high school. They had that where they had a big blow up thing, and the coach was like, "If we don't play good, we're not running out of the blow up tunnel." And it was like one of those things. It was
That was
blow
a
up tunnel.
huge motivator, I'm sure.
The weird thing is they like never lost. They went to like the state. They would go undefeated and then lose in the state semifinal
Because
every
they
year.
always wanted to run out of that blow up thing.
I guess.
That's what it was.
And there were no more home games once you got to the
When
state.
I was in high school, we were the Chatham Cavaliers. Same logo as UVA, except a C instead of a V. We even had a Cavalier on a horse. It was a girl, by the way, lead us out on the field. So
if I remember correctly,
if our coach had ever been like, if you don't play well, you're not going to get to run out behind this Cavalier on a horse, we would have been like, we think it's stupid anyway. So
if I remember correctly, similar results to the Cavaliers.
Yes, fairly similar.
Currently.
Yeah, we won a couple, though.
Okay.
They haven't.
I remember. What position did you play?
Corner and wide receiver, generally.
Nice. I think I came a little bit after that when I worked in Danville, but some of those Gretna Chatham games when Vic Hall was at Gretna, it was
every game.
It was an ugly couple of years for Chatham.
Every game Vic Hall played in high school, it was not good for the other team.
But it was especially bad for Chatham.
Now, here's what I remember is like Robert Prunty was their coach when I played. Robert Prunty, who went on, be a college coach and everything like that. We had a couple of players transfer from Chatham to Gretna. And one of them, like our head coach even made fun of. He's like, yeah, loved him. He was a great kid, not a very good football player. Well, that kid transfers under Robert Prunty for 2 years and then goes on to play for Bridgewater and played in the Division III national title game 1 year. This guy was a much better football player when he got better coaching and things like that. But, don't want to talk about that again.
That was Gio's. We've gotten off on a tangent over there.
Absolutely. I'll take responsibility for getting us off track here with the third down talk. So you guys actually already mentioned this. We already talked about the D-line, the strip sack, the 4 sacks. So let's go to Phil Jerkovic, went 11-22, 235 yards, 2 touchdowns. How would you grade the secondary's performance for VT? Did give up a couple of explosive plays.
I think this outside of, the first one was a screen, or second one was a screen pass. I'd have to go back and look at that one. The first one, the wide receiver got past Canteen. Delane was trailing. I don't know if Delane was just late getting there or if he was doing the right thing and the guy just burned Canteen. But generally speaking, I thought they did well. But again, like the secondary hasn't been truly tested this year because everybody's passing attack that they faced, except for Purdue's, has been really, really bad. So they haven't faced a balanced offense yet this year. We'll talk about Florida State more, obviously, on Thursday, but Florida State's going to be a totally different animal than any offense Virginia Tech has faced this year because there's balance there.
Yeah, that second one on the screen pass they had looked like Powell Ryland tried to tackle him and almost like shoved him towards the end zone.
Like let me give you a push.
Somebody's like, oh, an assist for Powell Ryland. I'm like, yeah, it kind of looked like a Hadouken from Street Fighter 2 where he just like pushed him forward like that and he just accelerated straight to the end zone. So that was just a get him on the ground type situation. I can't remember exactly what happened on that first one. All I know is I was typing about Virginia Tech score and I look up and Pitt guy is running down the field. So I didn't even really see the play. They just beat him over the top. But, 2 big plays like that. One that you kind of put on the coverage because the other one was a screenplay like that. And, I think they played okay, but again, didn't get tested very much. Pitt's just a disastrous offense this season.
I know you guys had mentioned it, so we can keep it brief here, but the linebackers this week, Brent Pry said that he thought the run fits were a little bit better. Just your grade on the linebacker play.
I thought they were very good from what I could see. And, obviously there wasn't as much of a rotation. You're grading on a curve, though. Like, Pitt's running game and offense in general has been wretched. So, yes, they got better, but Pitt's nowhere as good at running the football as Marshall or Rutgers or even Purdue. So, I know it sounds odd to say because of what Pitt has done against Virginia Tech in the past, but this year's Pitt team is nowhere close to that on the offensive side of the ball. So I thought they got better. I thought they did well the other night. Also against, obviously, to me, the worst rushing game they've played all year. So Old Dominion, who isn't very talented, they went up to Marshall this week and had over 300 rushing yards.
It was like 350
Yeah,
or something
it was insane. Like, they passed for under 100. But, they played to their strengths and ran the ball over the place. So ODU can run the ball. The Purdue running back is good and physical, I think. Rutgers can run the ball. Marshall can run the ball. They're all miles ahead of Pitt in the running game. So they were bad. Tech was better. But how much better, I don't know, because there was such bad competition.
You know what you like to say when don't take PFF with a grain of salt, but when it matches the eye test.
Yeah.
Who do you think was the highest grader against the run defense?
Run defense, either some random defensive tackle or Tisdale.
It was Tisdale.
Okay.
Second best run defense grade of Tisdale's career.
Okay. Which is funny because like last week was like the worst grade of his career.
He had an 81.2. Fourth on the list was Kelly Lawson at 74.7.
Which is probably, I would guess, top 2 or 3 best of his career, maybe the best.
Yeah. Keyshawn Burgos and Narelle Pollard were 2 and 3.
Okay.
All right. Interesting stuff. Well, I want to ask you guys this. You know, it's kind of our journalistic responsibility. Yes, we talked about so much good. Hokies did play fantastic on Saturday, but even Coach Price said things that got to be better. One thing that stood out to me big time, 10 penalties for 91 yards. That can become costly when you don't have a margin for error. And, you know, Tech did have a margin for error in this game.
Correct, they did. Like when you're... you can get an unsportsmanlike conduct penalty and give them a free first down, and you still know that there's pretty much no chance they're going to score off of it. Can't do that next week against Florida State because that group will take advantage of it. So, yes, that's something that'll have to be cleaned up.
One of them was Kyron Drones'
Spiking the ball.
Right.
Well, here,
so he's running.
Well, that
yesterday.
was probably didn't say it to us, but I think he said on the AC Zach where he's like, "Oh, congratulations! I'll see you running punishments or whatever."
Yeah.
For the penalty.
Like Tech did more. All right. So after the first touchdown pass of the game, when he was running down the field toward the end zone, Drone said something to the Pitt cornerback.
Oh yeah, I saw that.
Yeah.
He sort of got in
I
his
didn't
face
realize it until I watched the condensed version. So I don't know if they know each other or something, or if he was just talking trash to him. But then obviously, you know, Delane talking trash and got the flag later in the game. There was definitely more of that from Virginia Tech this week. I know some people don't like that, but that is like the little playing with an edge to a certain extent.
And you love that edge that they're bringing. You know, there's part of you that's like, you don't want them to take that away, but at the same time, if, you know, in a bigger game, you can't afford 15 yards. Yeah.
The other thing I would point out, this third straight game, Drones has lost a fumble that has led to points.
That's right.
This one led directly to points. They just picked it up at the 4-yard line.
So
that's the easiest touchdown of that guy's career.
So that's the next step for him. Have a turnover-free game. So people are going to ask us later this week, what does success look like against Florida State?
I actually got that question.
Did you? Okay.
And I was waiting to see if you were going to talk about it.
Yeah, I guess I haven't researched them heavily yet, so maybe my answer will change on Thursday. But keep doing the same type of stuff you're doing on offense. If it gets shut down this week because of Florida State's superior, athletes, that's okay. If Tech loses, I want to feel like it wasn't because they were outcoached. And then secondly, for Kyron Drones, let's have the first turnover-free game of your career. I think that would be an important step forward of his development.
That's a big ask against a very good team.
It is. I mean, so it might not be a fair ask this week, but maybe do it one time in the next couple weeks.
Yeah, I think you live with those mistakes with Drones, and you keep rolling with him.
Yeah,
and just have to play it. But 3 turnovers that have led directly to points. It's been 2 touchdowns and a field goal, so 17 points off of 3 turnovers. That's a pretty big deal, especially when you give it to. I mean, the Pitt one was the easiest touchdown that guy will ever score in his career, but you fumble at the 10-yard line or 20, whatever it was against Rutgers, and they're in the end zone, before the national anthem is done. I mean, those are the kind of mistakes that you got to eliminate and just hold on to the ball.
Yeah, and I will say this, so it was 28-7 Tech. And then just in a matter of seconds, it's 28-21.
It did happen very quickly.
Did you guys get nervous?
Yes.
I was kind of like,
because this team hasn't, they've responded in some games to a certain extent, but also, you get down to the end against Marshall and you get down to the end against or Rutgers specifically, and it's like they faced pressure situations and just kind of fell apart in those late game situations. So I'm sitting here thinking, man, they've been playing with so much confidence tonight. Now Pitt got the momentum back. How are they going to respond? And they responded with a long Jalen Lane touchdown. So it was a great response. So I feel like I should have mentioned that in my article yesterday. It's like the response from Pitt regaining the momentum was very, very good.
There was a collective "here we go again" feeling in the stadium, and anybody who denies that, there were some nervous moments there. And again, a great response. This isn't a team that's been used to playing with a lead like that very often, so you sort of have to learn how to do that and keep the intensity up throughout that whole thing.
David, you talked about penalties, so I'll break down the penalties for you. Tech had 10, 3 were holding penalties, 2 were unsportsmanlike conducts. Then Tech had a grounding penalty, false start, a delay of game, an offsides, and a tripping. A lot of those can be cleaned up.
And they're spread out over so many different types that you can't really look at one and say, "Oh, that's a huge problem."
Now, what I will say, and what I did notice is that there were 2 times. One when Tech took a delay of game, and another when Tech had to burn a timeout on special teams. Tucker Holloway, Pitt came out of a timeout, and it looked like originally Pitt was going to punt, and then Pitt decides, we're going to go for it. And then I think Pitt ended up taking the timeout. But Tucker Holloway was back deep waiting to return it, and Tech had its defense on the field. And then later when Tech took the delay of game, Tech was punting and only had 10 guys on the field because Dante Lovett, he didn't have enough time to sub back on. So, a couple little special teams things here or there that made Tech burn a timeout and take a delay of game penalty. But, yeah, I think you look at a lot of this, it's like, okay, don't spike the ball after a touchdown. I did not see the tripping penalty. I know people were talking about that, the phantom tripping penalty. But you can fix a delay of game. You can fix an offsides penalty. The grounding penalty, it's like, those are things I think you live with. I think it's really the 3 holding penalties that's like.
Probably so. But again, Pitt's really aggressive defensively, and so they're a different challenge than most teams from that standpoint. I think, Brent Pry would probably be the first guy to say that he would much rather teach after a 17-point win than after all those losses that they were racking up.
What's completely in your control? The 2 plays completely in your control are the 2 unsportsmanlike. So if you can clean those up, 8 penalties looks a lot different than 10, I feel like, especially when those are each for 15 yards apiece, so the yardage is tallied way up.
Yeah, and I don't know what the average or the median of penalties is across college football, but I do think when you hit the double-digit mark, that's when people have a tendency to really look at it and get a little more into it from a critical standpoint.
It's even worse when it's double digits of the same penalty, like NC State last year.
Good point.
All right, a couple of big picture questions for you guys before we wrap things up for today. First and foremost, what does this win mean for this team, and how does it change the trajectory for the rest of this season?
How it changes it depends on their response, quite frankly, but it puts them in a better position, just from a statistical standpoint. Want to know in the ACC, 2 wins overall. If they were 1-4 right now, going into Tallahassee, and then assume they come out of that one 1-5, then any chance of going to a bowl was pretty much gone. I think the morale for the fan base would be extremely low, and you would worry about the players. That's what I talked about last week. Is I'm like, really want to win this game because if you keep losing, eventually that morale is going to drop. I mean, that's just human nature. So I think this win, the timing couldn't have been better for it, and the fact that it was home and you get to see it in person, I think makes it even better. So I think it was great, and I think if they continue to do the things offensively that they did against Pitt, and I recognize that each game is a unique challenge because of how the defense aligns and personnel and things like that. But if you come out with that same general scheme each and every week, I think it will put them in a better position to win. After the Florida State game, you've got Wake Forest, extremely well-coached football team, but they don't have the same quarterback they had last year, and that makes it a big difference. They're going to win a certain number of games because Clawson's a really good coach, but they're not going to go out there and out-talent Tech. I think if Tech plays like they did offensively the other night with that scheme, they have a great chance to win that game. NC State's offense is a mess. They have no skill position talent. Their starting running back quit the team after 4 games, and he's going to redshirt and transfer, which shows me that that offense has deep issues. That's a very winnable game. UVA is obviously quite winnable. Boston College is winnable.
We weren't saying some of these were winnable before this past Saturday.
We put them in the 50-50 range, coin flip range.
Yeah. I wish maybe Boston College or UVA was at home, particularly Boston College. Tech can win in Charlottesville. They've done that plenty of times. Haven't won too often in Chestnut Hill recently, but you're feeling better about some of those games. And
I disagree. I think you want those games on the road because those are 2 very winnable road games.
That's a good point.
Because if you get them at home, then all of a sudden you're playing at NC State or you're playing at Syracuse.
I'd rather.
Nobody wants to play at Syracuse.
It would be kind of a waste to play Florida State at home.
Right.
So So I understand your point on that. The BC trip still, it's BC. Syracuse isn't unbeatable. I mean, they lost to Clemson this past week, but it's Clemson. But my whole thing is if you can score 38 points, and I'm not suggesting Tech will or should do this every week, but they couldn't keep scoring 16, 17 points a game and have a chance to win. They just got to keep up this offensive scheme, this type of football, this brand of football. If they go back to the Marshall game plan and the Marshall scheme, they're not going to win very many more games. But if they keep up with this, I think they have a puncher's chance the rest of the way, and they'll at least play competitive football. And at the end of the season, we'll be able to look at it and say, okay, they got better as the year went on. And now I think every single offensive player for Virginia Tech who played in the game the other night is eligible to come back next year. I think that's right. I've gone through that in my head. I'd have to go check the box score and everything and the participation chart officially. But I think that's true. Is anybody I'm missing, Dave?
It would make sense with the COVID year.
Yeah.
Every
offensive player that played in the game for Virginia Tech the other night is eligible to come back next year.
Well, let's look at the participation.
The participation is also going to include special teams. So if you have a backup,
I think that's
Drones,
right. There's only a certain number.
Gosnell, Tootin, Chaplin, Moore, Clements, Schick, Meadows, Gosnell, and St. Germain were the starters.
Mm-hmm.
All of those guys are able to come back.
Now, Tech lists some of these guys as like seniors and redshirt seniors, but Felton's got a COVID year. Gosnell's got a COVID year. So some of these guys are eligible. I think I don't know what they list Clements, but anyway, some of those guys have COVID years. Even though they're listed as seniors, are eligible to come back. If you can get to the end of the season and you continue to run this style of offense, and even if you don't make a bowl, we can point and say, look at the difference in this team between the Marshall game and then what happened after the scheme change, like 2019, when they were so bad in September and the scheme change just flipped at everything for the rest of the season. And I think if we get to the end of the season, regardless of record, if we felt like they've improved and they improved over the last 8 games of the season, I think we'll feel pretty good about it, especially with all these guys eligible to return next season.
The only 2 guys, it's Stephen Gosnell and Jalen Lane, but they have a COVID year.
Right.
Those are the only 2 guys that could. I mean, they have to make a decision. Right. Everybody else can come back.
Right.
Especially Jalen. I mean, Gosnell's great as well, but if Jalen Lane came back, because then Quan Felton would be there. And what is the deal? Technically speaking, I don't know if it would happen, but Ollie Jennings could do an injury redshirt, right?
Yes, he could.
What do you think the odds of that are? That's a him decision.
That's obviously a him decision, and it would be a 7th year of football for him.
Do you think he could be an NFL guy now?
I don't know. I haven't seen him enough.
Yeah.
I thought he was very good at ODU last year. I know that. The thing is, there's 2 ways to look at this. This will be the 2nd year in a row he had a season-ending injury to his leg, right? So that's going to scare off some NFL scouts. So one way to look at it is if you can come back and stay healthy and prove that you're healthy, then you put yourself in a better situation. But the other side is like, man, I've broken my leg 2 years in a row. Do I really want to do this mess again? I don't know. I don't know what's going through his head. I expect he would come back. He would come back and play another year. That would be what I think. And if he's 100% and back to the old Ollie Jennings, it's just another added element.
Brent Pry did say when he was asked in the post-game press conference that they haven't written it off that he could come back. Like, Ollie's goal is to come back this year, they're working hard on it.
I'm sure it is, but at the same time, let's say he's eligible to play in let's say he does get back and play in the last.
He'd still get 4?
Yeah, I guess you get 4, but how would that affect any kind of a medical red shirt? Like if you applied for it and then they were like, oh, but look, you were healthy enough to come back and play in the last few games.
At that point,
I don't know. He's on crutches and in a walking boot.
It's
October, start of October, and he's on crutches.
He's not.
It's not
even
a great
if he does
sign.
play, it wouldn't be. I don't think he would be anywhere near 100%. So there's no point.
Yes.
Just shut it down and bring him back next year healthy.
Brent Pry's words were outside chance is exactly what he said. Anything else from anybody, David? You got anything else in the 4th chair before we wrap up for the day?
I want to talk about the offensive line. We got a question. Is the O-line improving, or is the drones effect bolstering the run game to this level? And my instant thought would be that I think Tyler Bowen's scheme a little bit, rolling drones out, has put the offensive line in better positions.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's both those things he mentioned plus what you just mentioned. I do think they have improved. I think the actual man-on-man play has improved to a certain extent. all that motion and stuff, like I've said, and the different types of play selections just makes linebackers and defensive linemen react a split second later. It slows down their key reads, and just it provides better angles of attack for the offensive line when they're during the actual play when that happens. And so yeah, I think the play calling is doing a better job with the offensive line. I don't think the offensive line last year was as bad as people thought it was, because I just think when you sit there and run it between the tackles almost every play, then it's easy to defend, and give your offensive line no shot. And I just think Tech did so much more the other night to put their offensive line in a position to succeed. They whiffed a bunch of blocks still, 12 tackles for loss. It seemed like Tech either made a really, really good play or they were just blown up for like a 4-yard loss is what it seemed like sometimes. But I think they were put in a better position to succeed. That's the type of offense you need to run when you have an inexperienced quarterback, but also a young offensive line as well, because it makes their job easier. And like I said, I just felt like the Tech offensive coaching staff, Tyler Bowen, for the first time, put his players in a position to succeed the other night and outcoach the opposition. So props.
Awesome.
Okay, I just looked it up. So Virginia Tech had 199 net yards rushing and 228 passing yards. You want to take a guess? And no, Andy already knows what it is. You want to take a guess the last time Virginia Tech had that great of an offensive game? Like rush for 200 and passed for 200 plus.
Duke, 2021.
There you go. So
scored 48
Fuente's the last game.
yeah. So the best you'd say that I mean by far, I don't think anybody's questioning it. The best offensive game.
Yeah, no question.
In the prior.
I don't think there's anything else even in the discussion, to be honest with you.
Andy, your final thoughts before we
just on you asked big picture for the rest of the season. I got this question last week in the mailbag. In my season predictions, I had them being 2-4 to start. I didn't have them with getting to 2-4 with the way that they've done it. I had them beating Purdue. I had them losing to Rutgers and Marshall, and then losing to Pitt as well.
Really?
So they're like, if they beat Pitt and lose to Florida State, which is possible, they're 2-4. Do you see? I was pretty negative on them making a bowl game last week. Does that change my thought on this? And I said, my answer was I didn't really think it changed much. Now, in my mind, picturing them beating Pitt was beating them 15-12 or something ugly like that, where they went out there and it's just like, okay, both these teams aren't that great. It's an ugly game, and they somehow managed to win it. They went out there and actually looked good. And they had a really good offensive showing. Defense showed up, great life. Kyron Drones turned into an incredible quarterback. It almost feel like overnight, and sort of that dynamic play. And I feel like that sort of changes the outlook. So, this is a tough matchup coming up with Florida State. I don't think they're going to win that. They're what, 25.5-point dogs in this game. That's a tough matchup.
High,
this is sort of like this stopper in the middle of the schedule, where I think everybody chalked it up as an L before the year, and I still am. So very good chance they'll be 2-4 after this game. But then you look at the second half of the season, and Chris went through it before. I mean, 5 of the 6 teams left in the second half of the season are middle to lower half of the ACC. You don't really have a lot of games out there where you go, they just can't win that one. Louisville, I think it'd be a tough one on the road. They look pretty good right now. Went on the road and won at NC State last week. But the other ones, there's just something off with those programs. They're not quite clicking. Syracuse is probably the other one on the upper end of that, but you get them here on a Thursday night. If you get an atmosphere like that in a Thursday night game, I don't know what the effect is in that game, what the T-shirt color will be in the crowd for that. But, you get a pretty good crowd, and that's a tough place to play and win. So, maybe I'm a little bit more bullish on their bowl chances at this point. I still don't think it's likely, because you have to, reproduce that performance week after week after week, and that's tough to do, especially when you have a small margin for error and can't really lose many of those games. But I think I'm a little bit more on the higher side of them being able to pull that off now, obviously after last week.
Surprisingly, it is not listed as an effect game. I don't think
it's just
they're doing
a Thursday night.
Yeah, it looks like they got the white effect for Pitt. They did the orange effect for Purdue, and then they're doing the maroon effect for Wake. And I guess they're not doing like a stripe out or anything this year.
It'll be the drunk effect, because people will just get really lubed
It's
up.
a
for that.
Thursday.
Lubed up for that game.
It is a Thursday.
All the more reason to take off from work and class and just start pre-gaming early for that one.
I
Encouraging all the students to skip class.
I had a professor say, like, he was like,
Why not?
He was upset. He was like, thanks to Syracuse. And I was like, I feel attacked, as I was wearing an SU hoodie in the front row, sitting next to Kyle Marshak, who's also from there. And the professor was like, thanks to Syracuse, he's like, we will not have class on the 26th. The university has announced that classes will no longer take place after 2 o'clock. And we were like, high five to that.
There you go. Then you go straight down to the bars and then to the game from there. It's perfect.
Center Street. There you go. All right. Well, gentlemen, it's always fun to get on here and talk about a win. Felt much needed, and this was a fun one. So thanks for your time.
Yeah, appreciate it. Enjoy.
Absolutely. All right, we'll see you on Thursday when we preview Florida State. Big one coming up this weekend. Stay tuned. These guys are going to have articles all week long, so check out, as always, at techsideline.com. On the video side, we're going to do our Triumph Spotlight this week with Malachi Thomas. Be sure to check that out on Wednesday. But for David Cunningham, Nick Brown, Andy Bitter, Chris Coleman, I'm Giovanni Heater saying so long from Blacksburg. We'll see you on Thursday.